Hey gang, welcome back to another video and part 2 of the Family Crypt build series. We've got a lot to cover in this video, so let's get right down to building some wall flats. Before we get started, let's go over the basics. There's 3 flats or panels to this build, 1 in the front and 2 on the sides. To help better explain how they're built, let's break down the individual parts. Horizontally at the top and bottom of the flat are rails. The vertical pieces are the stiles, and the pieces that fit in between the stiles are called toggles. Generally speaking, stiles are added every 24 inches moving left to right, and toggles are placed every 24 inches from bottom to top. Now that we've got the basics covered, we can get started right after this friendly reminder. I've cut down all of my 1x3s into lengths needed for this build, and roughly laid them out in position. I'll be using a pneumatic stapler with 1.5 inch narrow crown staples for the assembly since they provide a better hold. Then it's just a matter of lining up all my rails, stiles, and toggles and nailing them into place. I know my hand looks very close to the business end of the nail gun, but it's safely out of the way and I'm always angling away from it. During this part of the assembly, I find it easier to mark off where the lumber meets with a pencil or a marker. It's the best way I've found to minimize mistakes during assembly. With the rails and stiles taken care of, it's time to nail in the toggles. The first toggle can be nailed in as usual, but the second will have one side that needs to be toe-nailed in from an angle, since the first toggle is in its way. With the first frame complete, it's time to apply some glue and then place a thin sheet of plywood underlayment, sometimes called luan, onto our frame. Once the underlayment is aligned with the frame, it can be nailed into place. After I've secured the underlayment around the perimeter, I'll grab my tape measure and mark off where the center stile and toggles are, and will then nail along those lines to ensure that the plywood is completely connected to the frame. 1 down, and 1 more to go. If you find that your plywood extends beyond your frame, you can always use a router with a flush trim bit to remove any excess material. Just remember that the factory edge of the plywood is typically very straight, and you should always align your frame to the plywood whenever possible for a cleaner seam between your flats. With my 2 matching panels assembled, I'll give them a quick sanding with some 120 grit sandpaper to break the edges of the wood, which should help to minimize any damage from dragging them around. Off camera, I built the front face of the crypt much the same way as I did the 2 side wall panels, although the front has 2 window openings. I applied glue to the frame and then used the offcuts from my plywood underlayment for the outside skin. As you can see, the offcuts are quite a bit larger than the frame. So once again, I grabbed my trim router and removed the excess for a nice flush finish. The 2 openings I mentioned before needed to be removed, so I grabbed my drill with a large bit and made myself some starter holes that my trim router would fit into. Then I got to trimming out the openings. With all my wall flats built, there was only one thing left to do. I grabbed a few clamps and did a quick assembly to see how it looked. Well, that's going to do it for this video. In part 3, I'll be tackling all of the finishing touches like adding on foam detail and hard coating, but also the inclusion of a projection effect. But that'll have to wait until next time. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go make something.